Michael B. Jordan pushed open the glass door of the small grocery store, the bell above it chiming sharply as he stepped inside. He pulled the hood of his gray sweatshirt down, taking a look around the place. It was modest, a little dusty, but had a charm to it. The kind of spot where you could grab a few essentials without the chaos of bigger stores. He didn't expect any problems. Not here, not today. He grabbed a handbasket and started down the first aisle, picking up a carton of almond milk, some bananas, and a loaf of bread. He was reaching for a jar of peanut butter when he heard the sharp, deliberate sound of footsteps approaching. Turning, he found himself facing a middle-aged woman in a red vest, a store employee badge pinned crookedly to her chest. She crossed her arms and glared at him like he had just knocked over a shelf. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tight, not the friendly tone you'd expect in customer service. Michael smiled politely, shaking his head. "I'm good, thanks. Just grabbing a few things." He turned back toward the shelves, but the woman didn't move. She hovered there like a shadow. "You need to leave," she said, her voice louder this time. Michael blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" he asked, turning to face her fully. "You heard me," she said, her face hardening. "I don't want your kind here." For a moment, Michael thought he misheard. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe he was blocking the aisle. Maybe there was some mistake. But when he saw the look in her eyes, cold and deliberate, the weight of her words hit him squarely in the chest. "My kind," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Yeah," she snapped. "I don't want no trouble, but I don't want no black people shopping here, either. So get out before I call security." Michael stood there, stunned. He wasn't just angry. He was disappointed, hurt in a way that went deeper than he expected. He set the basket down gently, trying to keep his voice calm. "You know this is illegal, right?" he said, locking eyes with her. "You can't just kick someone out because of the color of their skin." She scoffed, her hands planted firmly on her hips. "I can do whatever I want," she said. "This is private property, and I say who stays and who goes." Michael took a slow breath, feeling the anger rise inside him but forcing it down. "I'm not leaving until you tell me exactly why you think you can treat people like this," he said. She smiled, a cold, nasty thing. "Because nobody's gonna stop me. Now get out." Before he could say anything else, she snapped her fingers, and two burly security guards came out from behind a counter, walking toward him with purpose. Michael raised his hands slightly, not wanting to escalate things, but as they grabbed his arms and pushed him roughly toward the door, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of injustice burning in his chest. As they shoved him outside onto the sidewalk, one of the guards muttered something under his breath that Michael didn't quite catch, but the tone was unmistakably hostile. The door slammed behind him. The bell jangled mockingly, and for a long moment, Michael just stood there, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. He could have walked away. Most people probably would have. But as he looked back through the glass, seeing the woman smirking behind the register, something inside him shifted. He wasn't going to let this go. Michael B. Jordan stood there for a few seconds, stunned, his mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. The cold air outside the store biting against his skin as he turned back and pushed the door open again with a firm shove, the bell above him ringing sharply once more as he marched inside. The same woman looking up from behind the counter with a sneer as if she had expected him to just slink away like some stray dog she had just chased off. But Michael wasn't about to let this slide. Not today, not ever. He walked straight up to her, his voice steady but simmering with outrage as he demanded, "Why are you kicking me out, huh? What's the real reason? Say it," he said, his tone daring her to speak the truth, and the woman smirked without a hint of shame, crossing her arms and shrugging with a dismissiveness that made Michael's blood boil. "I told you already," she said, loud enough for the few other customers in the store to hear, though they awkwardly avoided looking at either of them, pretending to be absorbed in the cereal aisle or their shopping lists. "I don't want blacks in my store, all right? Is that clear enough for you?" she spat, each word dripping with venom. And for a moment Michael could hardly believe he was hearing this in broad daylight, in a supposedly progressive city. In the year they were living in, he felt a raw, electric fury surging through him. But he kept his fists unclenched, his face composed, knowing that blowing up would only feed her narrative. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice low, but carrying a lethal weight, as he said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, lady. Your store's going to be shut down, you'll be out of a job, and everyone's going to know exactly what kind of person you are." And for the first time a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a sneer as she gestured sharply toward the back. "Security!" she barked, and within seconds the same two guards from before, both looking bored and mildly annoyed, stomped toward Michael like they had been itching for a reason to lay hands on him again. "You heard her, buddy. Time to go," one of them said, grabbing Michael's arm roughly, but he jerked it free, standing his ground. "You're all going to regret this," Michael said firmly, staring directly into the security guard's eyes, not with fear, but with a quiet promise of consequences. But they didn't care, they didn't believe him. They thought he was just another troublemaker to be tossed out, and so once again they shoved him through the door, the basket he had abandoned earlier still sitting forgotten by the peanut butter shelf, and the door slammed behind him with a vicious finality, the bell jangling mockingly in his ears. Michael stood there, his heart hammering in his chest, the cold wind whipping at his clothes, and he knew he couldn't just walk away. He wouldn't. He had a plan forming in his mind, slow and deliberate, fueled not just by anger, but by a deep, relentless need for justice. He turned on his heel and walked away from the store, but not far, just enough to make a few quick calls that would change everything. And then he waited until the time was right, until the gears had started to turn behind the scenes, and then, about an hour later, he returned. This time not alone. He pushed open the door with the same determined force, the bell screaming out his arrival, and the woman looked up from the counter, her smirk back in place, as if she found the whole situation amusing. Like he was some persistent fly she could keep swatting away. "Back again," she said, laughing under her breath. "Didn't get the message the first 2 times. Michael ignored her, stepping into the center of the store and raising his voice so that everyone could hear, customers, employees, even the bored teenage stock boy stacking cans near the back. "Everyone here," Michael said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "needs to leave right now. You're all fired." There was a beat of stunned silence before the woman behind the counter burst out laughing, a raw, ugly sound that was quickly joined by the security guards and even a few of the customers, all of them thinking it was some kind of joke, that he was just another entitled celebrity throwing a tantrum. "You hear that, boys?" the woman said between snickers, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "Mr. Big Shot thinks he owns the place." The security guards didn't hesitate, moving forward again, grabbing Michael roughly by the arms and dragging him back toward the door, this time with less patience, shoving him harder, making sure he stumbled down the concrete steps outside, the door slamming behind him with a victorious clang, their laughter still ringing in his ears. But Michael didn't fight back. He didn't yell. He simply stood up, straightened his sweatshirt, dusted himself off, and smiled to himself, because he knew they had just made their final mistake, the last one they would ever make in that store. He waited outside, hands in his pockets, the cold no longer bothering him, until he saw the black SUVs pulling up to the curb, doors opening in unison as a small, but serious group of people stepped out, his personal security team, a few lawyers, and 2 uniformed police officers accompanying them. Michael led the way back to the store, this time moving with the kind of purpose that couldn't be mistaken. The bell above the door shrieked once again as he entered. But this time the woman behind the counter didn't look so smug, her laughter dying in her throat as she took in the sight of the officers flanking him. The security guards straightened up, suddenly unsure, and the customers froze where they stood, sensing a shift in the air. "What is this?" the woman asked, her voice losing its earlier bravado, and Michael stepped forward, pulling a folded document from the inside pocket of his jacket, holding it up for her to see. "This," he said clearly, "is proof that I own this property. I bought the building 2 months ago, including this store and every business in this complex." The woman's mouth fell open, her eyes darting around as if looking for someone to contradict him, to tell her it wasn't real. But there was no help coming, no rescue, just the cold, hard truth staring her in the face. "Effective immediately," Michael continued, his voice calm but implacable. "You're all terminated. Your employment here is over, and you have exactly 5 minutes to vacate the premises before you're trespassing." The police officers stepped forward, their hands resting casually on their belts, making it clear they were ready to enforce the order if necessary. The woman opened and closed her mouth a few times, struggling for words, her face flushing an ugly shade of red. "Listen, we didn't mean," she started, but Michael cut her off with a raised hand. "Save it," he said, his voice cold. "You showed me exactly who you are. All of you did. And now you're going to face the consequences." Some of the employees began muttering apologies, their faces pale. But Michael didn't care. It was too late for apologies, too late for regret. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with them. The woman tried one last desperate plea, stepping forward, hands clasped together, like she could somehow undo the damage with a few pathetic words. "Please, I have kids," she said, her voice trembling. But Michael just shook his head slowly. "You should have thought about that before you decided to be a racist," he said, turning his back on her without another word, signaling to the officers, who began shepherding the employees out the door one by one, their protests growing fainter with each step until the store was silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. Michael stood in the center of the store, looking around at the now empty aisles, and for the first time that day he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile, because justice, slow though it might be, had finally been served. The sun had started to dip lower in the sky by the time Michael B. Jordan returned to the store, not alone, but with a full team behind him, black SUVs rolling up like a convoy, his personal security stepping out first, tall and serious, scanning the area with trained eyes, followed closely by the 2 uniformed police officers who walked with measured authority, their presence cutting through the usual noise of the city like a knife. Michael moved at the head of the group, the late afternoon light catching the hard set of his jaw, the tight line of his mouth, as he strode toward the front entrance, not rushing, not hesitating, but moving with the calm certainty of someone who knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The bell over the door shrieked its usual greeting as he pushed it open, and immediately the room fell into a stunned, unnatural silence. The woman behind the counter froze mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open as she saw the police officers flanking Michael. The 2 security guards straightened up, their earlier smugness draining from their faces as they realized this wasn't another empty threat. This was something very different, very real. Customers who had been browsing stopped what they were doing and stared, sensing the shift in power, sensing the storm that was about to break. Michael stepped into the center of the store without a word, pulling from his jacket a thick packet of documents, holding them up high so there could be no mistake. "This is the deed to the property. he announced clearly, his voice ringing out across the store. "I own this building, this store, this entire complex." He turned to the woman at the counter, locking eyes with her as she visibly shrank back, her earlier bravado crumbling like ash. "Effective immediately," Michael said, his voice steady and merciless. "You are all trespassing, and you are ordered to leave the premises. If you do not comply, these officers are authorized to remove you." For a few long seconds no one moved. It was as if time itself had frozen. Then the woman stumbled forward, her face twisting into a desperate, pleading expression. "Listen, Mr. Jordan," she stammered, her voice high and shaking. "I didn't mean it. It was a misunderstanding. Please, let's talk about this." Her hands fluttered uselessly in front of her like broken birds. But Michael didn't so much as blink, didn't let an ounce of sympathy show on his face. "It's too late for that," he said, his words falling like hammers, final and absolute. "Your actions have consequences. You should have thought about that before you decided to show your true colors." Behind him, the police officers stepped forward, one of them gesturing sharply toward the door. "You heard him," the officer said, his voice flat. "Time to go." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but no one moved to help her. No one protested. The security guards exchanged helpless glances before lowering their heads and starting toward the door. The woman followed, still babbling apologies, still hoping somehow to undo the damage. But there was no saving her now, no redemption to be found. Michael stood there watching as they shuffled out one by one, the bell over the door jangling with each exit, until finally the store was empty except for a few stunned customers who had remained rooted to the spot. Uncertain what to do, Michael turned to them, offering a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're closed for today," he said simply, and the customers, sensing it was better not to argue, quietly made their way out. Leaving Michael and his team alone in the store, the place felt different now, hollow, like the air itself had been cleared of something foul, something toxic. Michael walked slowly through the aisles, taking in the chipped tiles, the faded signs, the shelves half-heartedly stocked. He saw not just what the store was, but what it could become. Something better, something welcoming. He turned to his team, nodding once, and they immediately got to work, calling contractors, designers, consultants, preparing to gut the place from the ground up, to erase every trace of the ugliness that had festered here. Over the next few days, the store transformed. The old staff replaced by a new team carefully selected by Michael himself, people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, united not just by their skills, but by a shared belief in respect, dignity, and community. The dusty old signage was torn down and replaced with bright, clean letters spelling out the new name Michael had chosen, a name that stood for hope, for change, for everything that had been denied to him in that ugly first encounter. When the doors finally reopened, the bell above them rang out not with hostility, but with warmth, welcoming everyone who entered, no matter who they were. Michael stood near the entrance on that first day, watching as families, young couples, elderly shoppers filed in, their faces lighting up as they saw the bright new space, the friendly smiles of the new staff, the atmosphere humming with a sense of new beginnings. One of the new employees, a young woman with bright eyes and a quick smile, approached him, holding out a clipboard. "Mr. Jordan," she said, "would you like to say a few words to the team before we open officially?" Michael looked around, feeling a rare surge of pride, not in his fame, not in his success, but in this, in what he had built, what he had reclaimed from hatred and ignorance. He took the clipboard, setting it aside, and turned to address the small group gathered near the front. "All I want to say," again, his voice strong and clear, "is that this store is for everyone, no matter where you come from, no matter what you look like. You are welcome here. You belong here." There was a round of applause, small at first, but growing louder, and for the first time in days Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the knowledge that he had not just won, but that he had turned something ugly into something beautiful, something lasting. And as the first customers began to file in, he knew deep down that what had happened would never be repeated here. Not while he was watching, not while the people he had chosen to stand beside him were there to carry the torch. This store would be a symbol, a quiet testament to resilience, to justice, to the simple truth that everyone deserves respect. And as the bell jingled brightly overhead, Jordan smiled, a real smile this time, knowing that he had not just changed a store, he had changed a small corner of the world, and maybe, just maybe, that was only the beginning.